Hi everyone, my name is Francesca and this is the presentation for my Bachelor final project, Going Underground, a small reflection on the contemporary relativization of reality. First of all, we're going to quickly give you an introduction of what is this presentation going to be about. So first I will talk about the program in which this project is inserted in. Secondly, I will talk about the aim behind the project. Then I will talk about the structure. And finally, I will discuss with you some design process and decision. Firstly, I talk about the unexpected task which was asked to me roughly 10 months ago in December 2021 when I received a message from the year 2183. An invitation to be part of a special program, and surprisingly for me, this was signed by something called the Ministry of Human Resource Development. And in order to explain you who this is, I need to first explain you from the time from which this message came from, so 2183. So a short introduction to the future basically. So firstly, well, as you probably, a lot of you already guess, it won't be good, as in particularly for us, like for human. But apparently from our ashes and our kind of leftover, there's a new ecosystem emerging, like creating is something completely new. And this is mostly because two species met. They were both in search of material, and both are actually already now existing in form of networks. And they're both necessary for transmission of food and information, and they're both capable of remodeling the landscape. But most importantly, they were both willing to build an ecosystem independent from humans. Meaning that in this chaos, the two species which met were the mushroom met and joined forces with artificial intelligence, and the fungi was born. And even if the heat and the pollution and the radiation was it will be spreading the word and basically make life very hardly possible for vertebrates, this new ecosystem is able to reabsorb and flourish from it. And as it will be able to reabsorb all the last traces of the Anthropocene. Meaning that in 2183 we will be in a post-Anthropocene era. And this fungi kind of spread quite fast all over the planet. But it didn't forget other species and included humanity. In fact, it somehow created a place where people can survive, and it's also better because it's closer and deep into this, which is the underground reserves. These underground reserves are, as the name says, underground, and they are also the main reason why this project was created, because this project is part of a program for the development of those reserves. That's why the Ministry of Human Resource Development is the organism responsible for sponsoring this program, and also for creating this field research, in which past part of it is this, that aim the past. Those fields research are, the idea is to compare the situation which will be in 2183 with the situation which is like in the past, for example, in nowadays. In particular with the aim of studying specific social mechanism like echo chamber and filter bubble. And the aim is answering the question of why and how people and humans fall into echo chamber. Therefore, these programs are not just location specific, they're also social. So for example, the one Going Underground is in the Western European University. That's why it was aimed to be a Bachelor project in 2022. That's where Going Underground basically come into. This is the framework in which Going Underground was created. So basically the aim behind the project is to create an experience reproducing and simulating echo chamber mechanism. Just for the one of you who do not know what an echo chamber is, it's a social structure in which relevant voice has been actively discredited. So it's different from an epistemic bubble or just a simple bubble in which simply the contrary view are omitted or like excluded. An echo chamber bring the member inside it to actively distrust the outsiders. So basically, the idea is to create specific condition which create biased voices and which they actually discredit the others, creating mistrust. So, and this brings us why is 2022 a good field research for the future ministry. So first of all, as the fungi somehow has similar effects on our daily life as kind of internet. It allowed us to be connected. It allowed us to create tools based on the connection provided by internet. And more in particular, because in the future there will be something called the contaminating mycelium sources, which is a little spore which is given to which human developed with the fungi in order to expand their senses. So to be able to survive better, basically, to hear a sort of augmented reality and to see a sort of augmented reality of the future. So this is the contaminating mycelium spore, which allowed humans to perceive the world differently. So if it's like a very sad location, they might just perceive it wonderful and beautiful because of this augmented reality, which is kind of grown into them. And also allow them to avoid people who do not share the same reality. And this, I don't know, maybe it already sounds similar to you. It sounded very similar to the digital and social media consumed that we have today. We are in a world which, because of the way that we are filter information, or beside the cause, but for sure we have very different view on the world, and we think that it seems to not share anymore the very basic truth, or like seems the truth is so relative. So I think therefore it's quite a good comparison this time to our time. And this also this attitude to our social media bring also to a constant polarization, which is also present in the future. And therefore is our current 2020, 2022 a very good moment in time to make this research. So basically the idea behind is to create this echo chamber mechanism in order to collect data and genetic material to establish then in the future the degree of human predisposition to echo chamber. That's it. So then we come to the experiment structure. So how did I plan to proceed on creating this experiment? So first I thought to create an introduction where it's presented to the people joining the experiment, this new scenario, then a simulation in which the mistrust is created and the filter bubble and echo chamber is actively created, and then a moment of result with discussion and the data collection. So the introduction is quite simply done by a booklet. It's quite important. The whole game is it's very accessible, so it has to be something appealing that people are willing to do, that feel fun to do. And this is like the small booklet at the beginning in which the fungi introduce itself, explain where it comes from, what is the future about, and also give a sort of welcome to the participant to the experiment itself. So the fungi itself give the introduction and explain what's happening in the future. Then in this booklet there's also the explanation of the actual simulation, and again has to be engaging, has to be something that people are willing to do, for example a game. And so here is the explanation of how the actual game it's gonna work, and also all the elements inside and how it's gonna work. And finally there's also my personal writing and my personal thesis, which I wrote based on the comparison between 2022 and 2183. So for this booklet I used like a combination of fonts, which is like mostly from ABC and favorite, mostly for the text, light, a combination between light and medium, and Sint for the titles. I also create a logo. I wanted to be quite wobbly and squishy, and also kind of similar to these tentacles which are all over this game. That's the booklet finally, that you can see more or less how it is, and there's a citation at the beginning, the index, and then in these 3 different parts also reflect in the booklet itself as in the structure of the simulation. Then we go to the core of the simulation, which is the board game itself. And again, here it's very important that I created something which is appealing to people. That has to be something which is attractive and not like kind of almost like a very consumer-oriented product that feels like people want to use it. So that's why I use a very classic board game format with a board on the floor, like classic, very tangible for also 2022 users. Again, the aesthetic was a bit more interesting to find, but again, using like mostly everything was hand draw, and using still a little bit this kind of a little bit of a futuristic vibe there is in the aesthetic. And in the game format, basically, it's kind of the classic game in which you have a checker and you move around a new space and you explore it, moving from one location to another. The way people move into one location is thanks to the instruction given by their characters. At the beginning of the game, people pick one card, a sort of passport card, which has a character, which once turned and scanned, lead you completely with their voice into an adventure, into the dynamic of this game. You get a link and you move to Telegram, which is also not a coincidence choice for, as Telegram is one of those applications in 2022 which is spread extremely views of echo chambers, and where it allowed echo chamber views to be working like they do. So in one of this channel you receive the instruction and everything you need, but also you hear the voices of the actual character, which will guide you through the game.
I am Jankara Skidye, and from now on you will be playing me. I am one of the younger members of the government of the Republic of Fung AI.
So this was an example, for example, of Giancarla, which is one of the character. Here we hear a small brief sample from all of them as well. And these are the kind of, we could call them the filter bubble. You move into the game hearing just one side of the story. You just hear the side of Giancarla.
Welcome to the living cells, the residential areas of the Republic. Life here, underground, is difficult, and space and oxygen are rare. Therefore we need to live in small living cells. But, thanks to the CMS, those little cells can be fully personalized and perceived as infinite space.
This is Lowenbo.
The people who live here, they often have refused, or had been taken away, a fully functioning CMS.
Then we have LBO2.
I was born here and I was trained here. So, until I became an adult, 4 years ago, I never actually saw anything else.
Then we have Rain Addy.
Therefore we live in quite small living cells. But, thanks to the CMS, those little cells can be fully personalized.
And then we have Noah.
A self-affirming bubbles, where nothing matter but one's wishes. The problem is that this made us incapable of accepting different views.
So as you hear the voices, they're not just obviously one-sided, but while you hear just one side of the argument, you also have a voice which actually discredit the other side. So that's why it's so important that they actually discredit the other side of the argument. That these characters are divided in groups inside the Republic, but this is something that I would rather not go into details, as it might spoil the game itself. In the board game, there's also a part in which every time you are in a location, you need to turn a card and scan it with an app, and you see small animation which are needed for the aim of the game. So those are all animation which will be needed once you play the game. They contain important information. For example, which colors you see and things like this. These are important for the dynamic of the game itself. Towards the end, so at the end, after being asked if you trust the other side or something similar, obviously not as direct, but like more masked in an action, if you trust the other side, based on your answer, you are then linked to another Telegram chat in which you can also discuss with others, and also it's reveal a bit the idea behind the game, and then you basically discover the real, like the people who participate to the experiment discover the real meaning of the and the purpose of this journey which they took part of. And also it's an invitation to an open discussion, and obviously to explain also how to donate the genetic material. In the exhibition itself that I created, I had like a little sample collecting station. In the game there are some of these bags which can be which the genetic material can be inserted, and then towards the very end, there's also a link to the theory work that I made, and so the kind of explaining again the comparison between this reality and our reality. Now we go a little bit talking about the design process that I had, in particular about finding an aesthetic. As I said, I draw mostly by hand, and I haven't received from the ministry any actual imagery. I had to create some sort aesthetic based on what I was described, which was interesting because it was a lot about this reality, then other reality, the future, but also viewing reality in a certain way. So I first draw a lot by hand, a lot of those drawings that you see right now, which more and more like inspired from what I was hearing. And finally I filled loads of sketchbooks of sketches, drawing, trying to find this aesthetic, and that was kind of the process of how I perceive. The other very important part of the development was the development of the character itself. As I said, there originally were more. There were 9 characters, and as I said, they were divided in 3 different groups. Was the beginning when I was trying to define what a character is, how do they look like, what do they like, and also like were based on characters that the ministry told me about, but I had to refine them and also clarify how were their position, how are they antagonistic to each other, and this was a huge actually part of the work. And also a huge part of the work was trying to represent them, because there's a clear difference between the characters in reality and in hyper-reality as they see themselves. So originally I was thinking to represent them in both reality and hyper-reality, but at the end I decided that every time you draw a character and there's such a strong personality in it, there's something that it's more difficult for you to fully identify with this character. So At the end, I decided to go for just the arm. So this was a very long process to decide that, okay, I will not represent the faces. I will just represent the part of the body that you see when you're actually sitting at a table and you have this name tag in front. So kind of like this. So when people sit and play the game, you have in front of you, you have your name and this little, like the arms and the head, you become this character. So this was a very long process, but at the end, this is kind of how it looks like, this little passport, which at the beginning you pick and then you open and you see your name, something about your character, because all of them have explained something about the role or the personality of the character, but not directly the face, and you can place it so that the others can read your name and your color. Another huge part of the development was the development of the actual plan of the Republic. So the whole structure of this underworld, which I've been described, but again, having no images, I had to basically design myself. And this was a long process of different type of structure that I tried to came up with or to understand. And at the end, this was the most close to what I understood it is. So this was the first, as I said before, I work mostly by hand first, drawing a lot by hand, and then finally I draw everything by with iPad, with Procreate. This is actually a 30-second speed up of my 3 weeks work to draw this the board of the game, which was extremely a lot of work, even just the shadowing part, which here looks like a flickering of a second, and in reality was very actually long and hard work. So yeah, and at the end this is the result. Again, yeah, not looking like how much work it actually there is behind. And then we come to the packaging actually of the game. As I said, it's very important the game looks something appealing, even if like it's not actually commercial purposes, but it looks like commercial purposes and very accessible. So I built the actual box, glued the paper, printed, laminated it, glued it on top, and even made the inlay for all the elements of the game, which was very laborious work, I would say. But I have to say I'm very happy to have a box in which everything fits nice and tidy inside, included the specimen bag, the human sample guidance, so the passport, the booklet, and finally the board, the folded board, and that's the box. Fully designed. Also in the back there's a description of the game, what is inside the box, the age, the time needed to play, and the number of players, and in particular also the sponsor and the idea behind the game. A little details also were the checker, which I like. Each character have their own checker, which I made in Fimo. They are very tiny, actually. And there's also some elements, some important elements, for example, where the seed at the end of the game has to go. Again, this is part of more the dynamic of the game, which is, I will not go too into it, but yeah, at the end, these are all the checker and figures and the game itself. So it looks, so this is one of the key figure where the seed is inside, and there is a magnet to take it out. And yeah, so about the game mechanics, that was a very laborious part of the project, as you need to understand at any point what characters is doing what, with developing their own narratives and their own view of the world. Therefore, this was actually my main working sheet where I worked the hardest, because here I could have an overview of who is where at when. and plan their interaction, plan how I build the mistrust for each characters towards the others. And this was actually one of the hardest part of the work, even if it doesn't look like, but it was and also a main reference. But it was great to see it played when people were playing it and following the instructions, scanning the cards, and playing. It was very fun as well. Also to see the reaction of people not understanding. Okay, well, I was like, what? My character is not right. Yeah, and all of this was also done because I made a little exhibition in which it was possible to see the game, see the packaging, give the samples, see my process, and play the game. So this is, for example, the process and the actual setup for playing the game. There's also a little corner in which you could observe also the little object that I've made and the actual box with the inside and the board. And I finish with a little quote from Anna Lowenhaupt-Singh for The Mushroom and the End of the World, a book that actually meant a lot for me in the development and the creation of this project. And I will just read it out loud. How does one tell the life of the forest? We might begin by looking for drama and adventure beyond the activities of humans. Yet we're not used to reading story without human heroes. Can I show a landscape as the protagonist of an adventure in which humans are only one kind of participant? There are other ways of making words. Yet expectation of progress block this insight. Talking animals are for children and primitives. Their voice is silent. We imagine well-being without them. We trample over them for our advancement. We forgot that collaborative survival requires cross-species coordination. We enlarge what is possible. To enlarge what is possible, we need other kinds of story, included adventures of landscape. Well, that's all. Thank you very much for listening.